The police officer's knuckles rapped against my front door at 6:47 a.m., the sound splitting through my quiet morning like a gunshot. Through the peephole, I watched two uniformed figures shift their weight on my welcome mat, their expressions carved from stone. My coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering across the kitchen tile in a spray of ceramic shards and dark liquid that splattered up my ankles. Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. I pressed my palm against the doorframe, steadying myself before turning the deadbolt. The morning air rushed in, cold and sharp against my face. The taller officer held up a badge, but my eyes couldn't focus on the details. Everything had gone fuzzy around the edges. Ms. Hayes? Olivia Hayes? Yes. The word came out strangled, barely audible. The officer's partner, a woman with her hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her forehead, stepped forward. She held a folder pressed against her chest like a shield. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. I gripped the doorknob, my knuckles turning ashen. We need to ask you some questions regarding allegations made by your son, Trevor Hayes. Trevor, my baby boy, now 32 years old, living across town with that girlfriend who'd never liked me. The last time I'd seen him was Thanksgiving, 3 months ago. He'd barely touched his sweet potato pie, the one I'd made special because it was his favorite since he was 7 years old. I stepped back, and they moved into my living room without waiting for invitation. Their boots tracked mud across the cream carpet I'd just had cleaned last week. The female officer gestured toward my couch, and I sat, my body moving on autopilot while my mind raced through every possible scenario. A car accident, drugs, gambling debts, anything but the words that came next. Your son disclosed to his therapist that you sexually abused him throughout his childhood. The male officer read from a document, his voice flat and mechanical. The therapist filed a report with Child Protective Services, which has been forwarded to our department for investigation. The room tilted. My vision tunneled until all I could see was that manila folder in the woman's hands. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. I dug my fingernails into the upholstery, feeling the fabric bunch and tear beneath my grip. I sucked in air, my lungs refusing to expand fully. That's not true. That never happened. But they weren't looking at me like I was Olivia Hayes, retired elementary school teacher, volunteer at the community center, member of the church choir for 40 years. They were looking at me like I was a monster. I stood, my legs shaking so violently I had to grip the armrest. The female officer tensed, her hand drifting toward her belt. I forced myself to sit back down, my body rigid against the cushions. Through the front window, I could see Mrs. Chen from next door peering through her curtains. By tomorrow, everyone on Maple Street would know the police had been here. We need to ask you some questions. The woman pulled out a recording device, set it on my coffee table between the ceramic angel figurines my sister had given me last Christmas. The red light blinked like an accusation. My throat constricted. I reached for the water glass I'd left on the side table hours ago, but my hand trembled so badly the liquid sloshed over the rim, soaking into my sleeve. The coolness spread across my wrist, but I barely felt it. Everything seemed muffled, distant, as if I were underwater. Can you describe your relationship with your son? The male officer had positioned himself near the doorway, blocking my exit. Not that I had anywhere to go. Not that running wouldn't make everything worse. I swallowed, tasted copper. Had I bitten my tongue? I raised him alone after his father died. Trevor was only 5. I worked double shifts at the school, took in laundry on weekends to keep us afloat. The words sounded hollow even to my own ears. The female officer wrote in her notebook, her pen scratching across the page with quick, aggressive strokes. She wasn't writing what I was saying. She was translating it into something dark, twisting my devotion into something unspeakable. My chest tightened. I pressed my palm flat against my sternum, trying to ease the pressure building there. The room grew smaller, the walls closing in. A framed photograph on the mantel caught my eye. Jerome at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning. I'd had to take out a loan for those cap and gown fees, had eaten nothing but rice and beans for 2 months to afford the celebration dinner afterward. Did you and Jerome share a bedroom? The question came sharp, cutting through my memories. Until he was 8, we only had a 1-bedroom apartment back then. More scribbling. The female officer exchanged a glance with her partner, and something passed between them. Recognition. Confirmation. They'd already decided my guilt before stepping through my door. I stood again, this time walking to the mantel before either officer could stop me. My fingers traced the frame's edge, the brass cold beneath my touch. Behind that photo sat another, Jerome at 6, missing his 2 front teeth, holding up a spelling bee trophy. 3rd place. He'd cried because he wanted first, and I'd told him 3rd place meant he was already better than most. "Ma'am, please sit down." Instead, I moved to the window, pulled back the lace curtain my mother had crocheted before arthritis crippled her hands. 3 more neighbors had gathered on their porches now. A police car in a quiet neighborhood drew attention like blood in water. My reflections stared back at me from the glass, a tired woman with gray streaks in her hair and panic in her eyes. The younger officer's radio crackled, static, then a dispatcher's voice requesting their unit number. He twisted the volume down, but not before the sound sliced through the room like a blade. My hand dropped from the curtain, fingers trembling against my thigh. "Mrs. Hayes, we need you to come down to the station." The female officer had risen from the couch, her body positioned between me and the front door. I turned slowly, my hip brushing against the radiator beneath the window. The metal was cold. The landlord never turned the heat on until November, despite the October chill seeping through the old panes. "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this time, but we need a formal statement." My knees buckled slightly. I gripped the windowsill, the paint flaking beneath my palm. Dried chips collected under my fingernails as I dug in, steadying myself. The room tilted, then righted itself. Breathe. Just breathe. I moved past the mantel, past the photographs that suddenly felt like evidence rather than memories. My purse hung on a hook by the door, the same hook where Jerome's backpack used to dangle when he'd rush home from school, eager to show me his artwork or a test score. I lifted the purse, its weight familiar but somehow wrong today, as if everything in my world had shifted slightly off-center. The male officer held the door open. Cool air rushed in, carrying the scent of dying leaves and Mrs. Chen's cooking from next door. Garlic and ginger. My stomach turned. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, but hunger was a distant concern now, pushed aside by the acid climbing my throat. Their patrol car sat at the curb, white with blue stripes, the engine still running, exhaust fumes mixed with the autumn air. I descended my front steps carefully, one hand on the iron railing I'd painted green last spring. The paint job had taken me 2 days, working in the evening after my shifts at the hospital ended. My lower back had ached for a week afterward. The female officer opened the rear door, Not the front passenger seat where innocent people rode. The back, where the handles didn't work from inside. I ducked my head, sliding across the vinyl seat. It was cracked in places, duct tape covering the worst tears. The smell hit me immediately. Sweat, fear, cleaning solution that couldn't quite mask what came before. The door slammed. I flinched, my shoulder striking the window. Through the glass, I watched my neighbors watching me. Sharon, from 3 doors down, held her phone up, recording. The phone case was pink, glittering in the late afternoon sun. I looked away, focusing instead on the metal grating that separated me from the officers up front. The younger officer slid into the driver's seat. His partner took the passenger side, her tablet balanced on her lap. She tapped something, the screen's glow illuminating her face. Then we were moving, pulling away from the curb, from my house, from the life I'd built piece by piece over 65 years. I watched my street disappear through the rear window. The houses grew smaller, then vanished as we turned the corner. My hands lay in my lap, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles went white. I forced them apart, pressed my palms against my thighs. The fabric of my uniform pants was rough, institutional. I'd worn these same pants to the hospital this morning, had checked vitals and changed dressings, and held the hand of a woman dying from cancer. Had that really been just 6 hours ago? The city passed by in fragments. A bus stop where a man in a torn jacket slept sitting up. A corner store with bars on the windows. Children playing basketball in a fenced lot, their shouts muffled by the closed windows of the patrol car. Normal life, continuing as if mine hadn't just crumbled. We stopped at a red light. A minivan pulled up beside us, a young mother at the wheel, 2 kids in car seats visible through the window. The mother glanced over, her eyes meeting mine through the patrol car's window. Her expression changed, curiosity shifting to judgment in an instant. She looked away quickly, said something to her children, probably telling them not to stare. The light changed. We accelerated, leaving the minivan behind. My reflection ghosted across the window glass, superimposed over the passing buildings. I looked old. When had that happened? When had the lines around my mouth deepened into grooves? When had my eyes developed that permanent sadness? The police station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with narrow windows. A flag snapped in the wind above the entrance, the rope clanging against the metal pole. The sound carried even through the car's closed windows, rhythmic and hollow. Block 4. The patrol car swung into a parking space marked official vehicles only. The engine cut out. Detective Morris opened his door, the dome light flickering on with a tired buzz. I sat frozen, watching him walk around the front of the vehicle, his shadow stretching long across the pavement in the late afternoon sun. He opened my door. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of exhaust and hot asphalt. I forced my legs to move, to swing out and plant my feet on solid ground. My knees protested, 65 years of standing through hospital shifts, of bending over patients, of climbing stairs when the elevator was broken. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "This way," Morris said, his hand hovering near my elbow but not touching. We crossed the parking lot. Cigarette butts littered the ground near a metal bench. Someone had scratched graffiti into the bench's armrest, crude letters spelling out something I couldn't quite make out. The building's entrance was a double door, reinforced glass with wire mesh embedded inside. Morris pulled it open, and the institutional smell hit me immediately. Industrial cleaner, stale coffee, and something underneath it all that reminded me of fear. The lobby was bright and sterile. A desk sergeant sat behind bulletproof glass, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked up, assessed me with practiced eyes, then returned her attention to her computer screen. Her fingers clacked against the keyboard, each keystroke sharp and definitive. Morris guided me past the desk, through another door that required his badge to unlock. The hallway beyond was narrower, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My shoes squeaked against the linoleum with each step. We passed office doors, some open, revealing cluttered desks and filing cabinets. A coffee maker gurgled in one room, the smell of burnt coffee seeping out. He stopped at a door marked Interview Room C. The handle turned with a metallic click. Inside, a rectangular table dominated the small space, 4 chairs arranged around it. A mirror covered one wall, two-way glass, I knew from television, though seeing it in person made my stomach twist. Who would be watching? Who would be listening? "Have a seat," Morris said, gesturing to the chair facing away from the mirror. I sat. The chair was hard plastic, designed for discomfort. My purse hung from my shoulder, and I set it on the table, then reconsidered and placed it on the floor beside my feet. My hands found each other in my lap, fingers interlacing, gripping tight. Morris took the chair opposite me. He set a manila folder on the table between us, my name typed on a label affixed to the front. Hayes, Olivia M. case number beneath it, a string of digits that reduced my life to bureaucratic filing. He didn't open it immediately. Instead, he leaned back, studying my face with that same careful attention he'd shown at my apartment. "Would you like water?" he asked. "No." He nodded, reached into his jacket pocket, and produced a small recorder, the kind with a digital display. He set it on the table, pressed a button. A red light blinked on. Interview with Olivia Hayes, October 17th, 4:42 p.m. Present are Detective James Morris and Mrs. Hayes. His voice had changed, become formal, official. "Mrs. Hayes, you've been informed of your rights. Do you wish to proceed without an attorney present?" My mouth was dry. "I don't need an attorney. I haven't done anything wrong." He opened the folder. Inside were papers, forms I couldn't read from my angle. A photograph paper-clipped to the top document. My son's face staring up from the page. Terrence, my baby boy, now 42 years old, his features so much like his father's had been. High cheekbones, deep-set eyes, full lips. In the photo, he wasn't smiling. "Your son made a formal complaint," Morris said. "He's been in therapy for 18 months. His therapist felt obligated to report what he disclosed during their sessions." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, the laminate surface cool and smooth under my palms. 18 months. Terrence had been seeing a therapist for 18 months and hadn't told me. We'd had dinner together 3 weeks ago, had sat in my kitchen eating pot roast and green beans, and he'd smiled and asked about my work and never mentioned therapy, never mentioned complaints, never mentioned lies. "What did he say?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Morris pulled another document from the folder. His eyes scanned it, though I suspected he'd already memorized every word. He alleges sexual abuse occurring between the ages of 8 and 12, multiple incidents, escalating in nature. The fluorescent lights hummed. Someone walked past in the hallway outside, their footsteps heavy and purposeful. A phone rang in a distant office, went silent, rang again. "That's not true." He's provided specific details, dates, locations, circumstances. "I don't care what details he's provided. It didn't happen." Morris set the document down. His fingers drummed once against the table, a staccato rhythm that made me flinch. "Walk me through a typical day when Terrence was that age. When he was, say, 10 years old." I forced my breathing to steady, pulled the memory forward through decades of accumulated time. My fingers traced circles on the table, around and around, until Morris's eyes followed the movement. Terrence would wake up at 6:30. I'd hear his feet hit the floor above me. We lived in that 2-story on Ashland Avenue then. He'd come downstairs in his pajamas, hair sticking up on one side. The image materialized so clearly it hurt. I'd have breakfast ready. Oatmeal usually, with brown sugar. Sometimes eggs. Morris wrote something. The pen scratched against paper, each stroke deliberate. He'd eat at the kitchen table while I packed his lunch. Turkey sandwich, apple, juice box. He liked the orange juice ones, not the grape. My throat constricted. After breakfast, he'd get dressed. School started at 8. I'd drive him on my way to work at the hospital. You were a nurse? CNA, certified nursing assistant. I worked the day shift, 7 to 3:30. Morris made another note. Who picked Terrence up from school? My mother. She lived 6 blocks away. She'd take him to her house, give him a snack, help with homework. I watched my hands flatten against the table, the wrinkles and age spots foreign, belonging to someone else. I'd pick him up on my way home. We'd have dinner. He'd watch TV or play in his room. Bath at 8, bed by 9. Every day? Monday through Friday. Weekends we'd sleep in, go to the park, visit my sister. The words tasted like ash. There was no time for what he's claiming. No opportunity. Morris flipped to another page. The folder seemed endless, an accordion of accusations expanding outward. He says the abuse occurred on Wednesday evenings, that your mother had choir practice, and you kept him home instead of taking him there. My mother's voice echoed across time. I'll see you Sunday, baby. Calling to Terrence as she headed out the door in her burgundy choir robe. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9. I'd forgotten about those nights, the way memory discards the routine and preserves only the exceptional. She did have choir practice. The admission felt like betrayal. But Terrence came with me. We'd go grocery shopping, or I'd take him to the library. He loved the library. Can anyone verify that? The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Could anyone verify trips to the grocery store from 35 years ago? Could anyone remember a woman and a boy browsing library books in 1988? I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against linoleum. Morris's hand moved toward the folder as if to protect it. I stood, paced to the window, looked out at the parking lot below. 3 rows of cars gleaming in afternoon sun. A woman walked between them carrying a briefcase, her heels clicking audibly even through the glass. There were other people at the store, librarians at the library, but I don't know their names. I don't have receipts from 35 years ago. Your son has been very consistent in his therapy sessions. His therapist says he shows genuine trauma responses when discussing these events. I spun around. Morris flinched, his shoulders drawing up, his hand actually moving to his chest in an involuntary protective gesture. The movement stopped me, made me aware of how I must look. A 65-year-old woman suddenly looming, suddenly dangerous. Then he's lying to his therapist, or his therapist is lying to you, or both. I moved back to the table, but didn't sit. I raised that boy alone after his father walked out. I worked double shifts to keep food on the table. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every basketball game. I taught him to read and tie his shoes and be a good man. My voice cracked on the last word. And now, he's doing this. Morris gathered the papers, aligned their edges with precise taps against the table surface. We'll need to investigate further. I'll be interviewing your family members, Terrence's teachers from that time period if we can locate them, neighbors. When can I talk to him? I wouldn't recommend that right now. He's my son. He's also the alleged victim in a potential criminal case. Morris stood, tucked the folder under his arm. Any contact could be construed as witness intimidation. The words hung in the air like smoke. Witness intimidation. As if I were a criminal, a predator, someone capable of hurting my own child. Morris moved toward the door, his body angled away from me, maintaining distance. "How long?" I asked. "How long does this investigation take?" "Depends on what we find." He opened the door. A blast of cooler air rushed in from the hallway, carrying the scent of industrial cleaner and old coffee. I watched him leave, his footsteps receding, and stood alone in the conference room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and the ghost of my 10-year-old son eating oatmeal at a kitchen table that no longer existed. I drove home through streets blurred by rain and failing vision. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached, joints protesting with each small adjustment. The windshield wipers scraped across glass in rhythmic intervals that matched my breathing, shallow, mechanical, barely adequate. The house stood dark when I pulled into the driveway. I'd forgotten to leave lights on that morning, back when the world still made sense. My keys slipped from trembling fingers twice before I managed to unlock the front door. Inside, the air smelled stale, undisturbed. I dropped my purse on the floor beside the coat rack and stood in the entryway, listening to the silence press against my eardrums. My phone vibrated. I pulled it from my pocket, squinted at the screen through eyes that felt packed with sand. 12 missed calls, 8 text messages. I scrolled through the names. Paulette from church, my supervisor at the clinic, numbers I didn't recognize. One message from my younger son, Vincent, contained only 3 words. "Mom, call me." I set the phone face down on the hall table and walked to the kitchen. The sink held a single coffee mug from yesterday morning, lipstick still visible on the rim. I filled a glass with water, drank it standing at the counter, refilled it, drank again. The water tasted metallic. Wrong. Everything tasted wrong. The doorbell rang, sharp, insistent, then knocking, hard enough to rattle the frame. I moved through the living room, peered through the peephole. A woman stood on my porch, maybe 40 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She held a microphone. Behind her, a man hoisted a camera onto his shoulder, red recording light already glowing. I stepped back from the door. The knocking continued, then stopped. Footsteps moved across the porch boards. I crossed to the window, inched the curtain aside with one finger. The woman stood in my front yard now, speaking into the camera, gesturing toward the house. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear but could imagine. Accused. Allegations. Investigation. My phone rang. Vincent's name flashed on the screen. I picked it up, pressed it to my ear. "Don't answer the door," he said before I could speak. "There's reporters at my apartment too." "How did they—" "It's public record once charges are filed. Mom, listen, I'm coming over. Don't talk to anyone." The call ended. I lowered the phone, watched through the window as another vehicle pulled up. A white van with satellite equipment bolted to the roof. A second news crew emerged, moved toward my neighbor's house across the street. The elderly couple who lived there, the Hendersons, stood in their doorway. The reporter thrust a microphone toward them. I let the curtain fall, backed away from the window. My hip collided with the coffee table, sent a stack of medical journals sliding to the floor. The glossy covers fanned across carpet, images of anatomical diagrams and pharmaceutical advertisements scattering like playing cards. I left them there, climbed the stairs to the second floor. Terrence's old room waited at the end of the hallway. I'd converted it to storage years ago after he'd moved out. Boxes of Christmas decorations, old textbooks, winter coats in plastic garment bags. But underneath, beneath the accumulated debris of ordinary life, it remained his space. Same pale blue walls we'd painted together when he turned 12. Same window overlooking the backyard maple tree he'd once tried to climb until I'd caught him 3 branches up and ordered him down. I pushed the door open. Dust motes swirled in the dim light filtering through closed blinds. I navigated between boxes to the closet, opened it. His childhood possessions filled the shelves. Action figures with missing limbs, a basketball signed by players whose names I'd forgotten, school yearbooks arranged by grade. I pulled down the one labeled 4th grade and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The pages crackled as I turned them. Small faces stared back at me, frozen in time, mouths open in laughter or closed in serious concentration. I found Terrence's class photo, front row, second from the left. He wore the blue shirt I'd ironed that morning, his smile showing the gap where his front tooth had fallen out the week before. His eyes looked directly at the camera, clear and uncomplicated. I traced his face with one finger, searching for signs I'd missed. Some shadow, some hidden thing that might explain how that boy became the man who'd spoken poison to a therapist. But there was nothing. Just a child. Just my child. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Heavy, quick. Vincent appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. He must have driven too fast, run from wherever he'd parked. At 32, he still had Terrence's features, the same wide-set eyes, same strong jawline. But where his brother had grown lean and angular, Vincent carried more weight, moved with a solidity that reminded me of his father. "They're circling the block," he said. "There's 4 news vans now." I closed the yearbook, held it against my chest. Vincent crouched beside me, knees popping with the movement. He smelled like cigarettes, though he'd promised me he'd quit. "Have you talked to him?" I asked. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Tried." "He won't answer. Why would he say these things?" "I don't know, Mom." He ran both hands over his face, pressed palms against his eyes. "I've been thinking about that time, when we were kids. He changed around then, remember? Got quiet, stopped wanting to hang out. He was becoming a teenager, that's normal." "Was it, though?" Vincent dropped his hands, looked at me directly. "Because I remember you asking me if something was wrong with him, if kids at school were giving him trouble." The memories surfaced like something dredged from deep water. Yes. I'd asked. Vincent had shrugged, said he didn't know. They didn't share the same friends anymore. I'd let it go. Single mother, working 50-hour weeks, exhausted down to my bones. I'd let it go. "Someone hurt him," I said. The words felt like stones in my mouth. "Someone did something to him back then, and now he thinks it was me." Vincent stood, paced to the window, peered through the blinds. "Or he's lying to get attention. Or money. Or he's just, I don't know, sick somehow." Downstairs, the doorbell rang again. Then again. Someone pounded on the door with enough force to make the house shudder. Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, cursed under his breath. "It's already online," he said. "Local news site. Your name, your address, everything." I moved toward Vincent, reached for his phone. He pulled it back instinctively, then reconsidered and handed it over. The screen showed my face. A photo from my church directory, at least 5 years old. The headline sat above it in bold letters. "Local retired teacher accused of historical child abuse by adult son." The phone slipped through my fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a crack that spiderwebbed across the glass. Vincent bent to retrieve it, and I watched my own hands shake in the air where the device had been. My fingertips tingled, then went completely numb. "We need to get you out of here," Vincent said. He grabbed my elbow, steered me toward the closet. "Pack a bag, just essentials. You can stay at my place until—" The window exploded inward. Glass scattered across the carpet in 1,000 glittering fragments. A brick tumbled through the debris, rolling to a stop near Vincent's feet. He shoved me behind him, positioned his body between me and the broken window. Cold air rushed into the room, carrying the sound of car engines, voices shouting from the street below. "Get down!" Vincent hissed. He pulled me toward the floor, both of us crouching behind the bed. My knees screamed with the impact against hardwood. A shard of glass bit into my palm where I braced myself. Blood welled up, dark and warm. Another impact downstairs, something heavy against the front door. The wood groaned, but held. Vincent's phone rang in his hand, the shattered screen still functional. He declined the call without looking. It started ringing again immediately. "My purse," I said. My voice sounded strange, disconnected from my body. "Downstairs. My medication." "Forget it. We're leaving now." He half carried me toward the bedroom door, keeping low. Glass crunched under our feet. At the doorway, he paused, listening. The pounding on the front door had stopped. The sudden silence felt worse than the noise. We descended the stairs, pressed against the wall, Vincent leading. At the bottom, I could see shadows moving past the frosted glass panels beside the door. At least 3 people, maybe more. One of them had a phone raised, recording. The red recording light glowed through the glass like a malevolent eye. Vincent pulled me toward the kitchen, toward the back door that opened onto my small yard. My hip clipped the corner of the dining table, the same table where I'd served thousands of meals to my boys, where homework had been completed and birthday candles blown out. The pain registered somewhere distant, unimportant. The back door lock stuck. Vincent jiggled it, cursed, threw his shoulder against the frame. It gave on the third impact, swinging open to reveal my tiny garden, the fence beyond, the alley that ran behind the row of houses. We stumbled down the 3 concrete steps. My slippers. I was still wearing my house slippers, thin-soled and ridiculous. A figure appeared at the side gate. Young man, maybe 25, phone raised and recording. His face was flushed with excitement, mouth moving as he narrated for whatever social media platform would host his performance. "There she is! That's Olivia Hayes, the woman who—" Vincent charged him. The young man stumbled backward, nearly dropped his phone, then turned and ran. Vincent didn't pursue. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back fence. 6 feet tall, wood slats weathered gray. No way I could climb it. My body felt ancient, every one of my 65 years settling into my bones like lead weights. "The gate," I gasped. "Other side." We ran the length of the fence. My slippers slapped against wet grass, then caught on something, a garden hose, the one I'd been meaning to coil up for a week. I went down hard, hands outstretched. The impact drove the air from my lungs. Vincent hauled me up immediately, but my right wrist had twisted beneath me. It throbbed with a deep, sick heat. The back gate gave easily. We spilled into the alley just as headlights swept across us. Vincent's car sat 3 houses down, but a news van was pulling in from the opposite end, blocking our path. Its side panel advertised Channel 7 News in cheerful letters. A woman climbed out of the passenger side, smoothing her blazer, microphone already in hand. Vincent reversed direction, pulling me the other way. My wrist screamed. The alley opened onto a side street I'd walked 1,000 times, past houses where I knew the residents. where I'd brought casseroles when people were sick, where I'd been welcomed and trusted. A woman stood on her porch 3 doors down, Gladys Martinez, who'd lived there for 30 years. Our eyes met. Gladys's expression shifted through recognition, confusion, then something harder. She pulled out her phone. "Vincent," I said, my voice cracked. "I can't." He steered me between 2 houses, through a narrow gap I hadn't known existed. Garbage cans lined one side. The smell of rot and old food hit me like a wall. Something small and alive scurried away from our footsteps. We emerged on the next street over. Vincent's car was 2 blocks away now, in the opposite direction. He stood still, breathing hard, calculating. My wrist had swollen to twice its normal size. Each heartbeat sent fresh waves of pain radiating up my arm. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "What?" He listened, and I watched his face drain of color. "You're sure? When?" Another pause. "We're coming now. 10 minutes." He ended the call, looked at me with eyes that held something worse than fear. "That was my lawyer," he said. "The police just issued a warrant for your arrest." Block 810. My legs stopped working. The sidewalk tilted beneath me, concrete suddenly fluid. Vincent's hand caught my good elbow, keeping me upright as the world reassembled itself into hard edges and impossible reality. A warrant. The words circled in my head like carrion birds. Decades of teaching Sunday school, of baking cookies for church fundraisers, of being the woman people called when they needed help. All of it compressed into 2 words that would appear next to my name in databases and news reports and whispered conversations. Vincent pulled me forward. We moved through residential streets where people were finishing dinner, where the blue glow of televisions flickered behind curtains. Normal life continued around us, oblivious. A dog barked from a fenced yard. Someone laughed inside a house we passed. My son had done this. The thought was a knife that kept finding new places to cut. Marcus, my baby, the boy I'd nursed through pneumonia at age 6, who'd clung to me during thunderstorms until he was 12, had told lies so convincing that strangers with badges and authority now believed them. Had crafted a narrative so detailed that a judge had signed papers authorizing my arrest. Vincent's car appeared ahead, parked beneath a dying oak tree. He fumbled with his keys, dropped them, picked them up with shaking hands. The electronic chirp of the unlock button sounded impossibly loud in the quiet street. I reached for the passenger door handle with my left hand. My right hung useless, the wrist now purple and swollen like a grotesque bracelet. The door seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Vincent had to lean across from the driver's side to push it open. Inside, the car smelled like the coffee he'd spilled that morning, a lifetime ago when I'd still been a person instead of a fugitive. The leather seat creaked as I lowered myself down. Vincent slammed his door, started the engine, pulled away from the curb with the deliberate slowness of someone trying desperately not to attract attention. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "My lawyer's office. She says we need to surrender voluntarily." He took a right turn, then another. "It'll look better if you turn yourself in rather than having them come for you." Turn myself in, like I was guilty, like there was something to confess to beyond the crime of raising a son who'd grown into a liar. We passed a patrol car going the opposite direction. My entire body tensed, waiting for brake lights, for the whoop of a siren. The cruiser continued past without slowing. Vincent's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The streets grew more commercial. Strip malls replaced houses, a pharmacy, a dry cleaner, a Chinese restaurant with a flickering neon sign. Traffic thickened. Vincent wove between cars, checking his mirrors constantly. Every vehicle behind us might contain officers with my name on their list. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out awkwardly with my left hand. Text notifications filled the screen. 17 new messages, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I opened the first one. Child abuser. We know where you live. The second was worse. The third included a photo of my house with crosshairs drawn over the front door. I stopped reading and dropped the phone on the floor mat. They found me, I said. I don't know how, but they found my number. Vincent glanced at the phone, then back at the road. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. Marcus must have posted it online. He's been building this case against you everywhere. Social media, forums, victim support groups. The lawyer showed me. There are hundreds of posts. Hundreds. My son had spent months, maybe years, constructing an elaborate fantasy world where I was a monster. Had recruited strangers to his cause, turned me into a villain in stories shared and reshared across the internet. The scope of it made my head swim. We pulled into a parking garage beneath a glass office tower. Vincent's lawyer had a suite on the 14th floor. The elevator ride up felt like ascending to an execution. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed a woman I barely recognized. Hair disheveled, makeup smeared, one arm cradled against her chest like a broken bird. The doors opened onto a reception area done in chrome and leather. A woman in her 40s stood waiting, briefcase in hand. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her expression was all business, no sympathy. Mrs. Hayes? She said. Not a question. I'm Diane Reeves. We need to move quickly. She led us past empty desks, the office closed for the evening, into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Downtown spread below us, thousands of lights marking lives untouched by this nightmare. Diane gestured for me to sit, but remained standing herself. The warrant is for first-degree child sexual abuse, she said, pulling documents from her briefcase. Your son filed a detailed police report 3 days ago. He's claiming ongoing abuse throughout his childhood. My throat closed. First degree meant the worst category, the kind that carried decades in prison. Diane continued, laying papers across the conference table like evidence at a trial. He's provided what he calls corroborating details, specific dates, locations, descriptions. His therapist filed a mandatory report. 2 of his friends have given statements saying he confided in them years ago. That's impossible. The words came out strangled. I would never. I believe you. Diane's tone didn't change, still clinical and measured. But belief isn't evidence. We need to build a defense, and we need to do it fast. The media is already running with this story. Your face is on the news. Vincent moved to the windows, pressed his forehead against the glass. Below us, traffic moved in orderly patterns, people going home to families that still made sense. Diane pulled out her phone, typed something, turned the screen toward me. My driver's license photo filled the display, above a headline that made the room spin. Local retired teacher accused of decades of child abuse. The article had been published 20 minutes ago. My hands started shaking so hard I couldn't hold them still. This was real. This was happening. My son's lies had metastasized into something with weight and authority, something that would follow me forever, regardless of what any court eventually decided. We have 2 options, Diane said, putting her phone away. Turn yourself in tonight with me present, or wait for them to come get you. I strongly advise the first. Through the windows, red and blue lights suddenly painted the building across the street. Then another patrol car appeared below, pulling into the parking garage we just used. they'd found us anyway. The elevator doors opened onto the ground floor, and I stepped out between Diane and Vincent. Through the glass walls of the lobby, I could see 2 patrol cars angled near the entrance, their light bars silent, but still flashing red and blue across the polished marble. My reflection in the glass looked skeletal, hollowed out by fluorescent overhead lights. Vincent's hand found the small of my back, steadying me as we walked. His palm was warm through the fabric of my blouse. I concentrated on putting one foot in front of the other, on keeping my spine straight, on not letting my knees buckle under the weight of what was about to happen. A young officer pushed through the revolving door, his hand already moving toward the radio clipped to his shoulder. Behind him, an older woman in plainclothes followed, her badge visible on her belt. She had gray threading through her dark hair, lines carved deep around her mouth. Our eyes met across the lobby, and something shifted in her expression. Not sympathy exactly, but a kind of weary recognition. "Olivia Hayes?" Her voice carried across the space between us. "That's her," Diane said, stepping slightly forward. "I'm her attorney. We were on our way to turn ourselves in." The detective nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving my face. She pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket, unfolded it with practiced efficiency. "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of criminal sexual conduct in the first degree. 3 counts. 3 counts. The number hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had given them 3 specific incidents to charge me with. 3 fabricated memories polished into legal accusations. My stomach lurched, and I tasted bile. The detective approached, her partner moving to flank her. "I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." I did as instructed, my movements wooden and mechanical. The lobby smelled like floor wax, and the coffee someone had spilled near the security desk. Behind me, metal clicked against metal as the detective removed handcuffs from her belt. The sound echoed off the marble walls, impossibly loud. "You have the right to remain silent," she began, and I closed my eyes as cold steel encircled my wrists. The cuffs ratcheted tight, not painful, but inescapable. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Vincent made a sound in his throat, half protest and half anguish. I wanted to turn around, to tell him this wasn't his fault, that he shouldn't watch this, but the detective's hand was already on my elbow, guiding me toward the doors. "You have the right to an attorney," she continued. The lobby security guard had stood up from his desk, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes tracking our movement. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Outside, the night air hit my face like a slap. Humidity thick enough to choke on, carrying exhaust fumes from the street and something rotting from the dumpsters behind the building. The detective led me toward the nearest patrol car, her grip firm but not rough. Another officer opened the back door, and I saw the cage mesh separating the back seat from the front, the vinyl seats cracked and stained with who knew what. "Watch your head," the detective said, and her hand came up to protect my skull as I folded myself into the car. The door slammed shut with brutal finality. Through the window, I watched Diane hand the younger officer a business card. She was talking, her mouth moving rapidly, probably establishing when and where she could see me next. Vincent stood a few feet away, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders hunched forward like he'd taken a blow to the gut. He looked older suddenly, the lines around his eyes more pronounced in the pulsing emergency lights. The detective slid into the driver's seat, adjusted her mirror, and started the engine. The radio squawked something unintelligible. She reached for it, pressed a button, spoke a string of codes I didn't understand. Then we were moving, pulling away from the curb, and I twisted in my seat to keep Vincent in view as long as possible. He raised one hand, not quite a wave, just held it up, palm out, like he was trying to push back against everything that was happening, like he was trying to hold me here through sheer force of will. Then we turned a corner, and he disappeared. The drive took 20 minutes through streets I'd known my whole life. We passed the elementary school where I'd taught for 30 years, its windows dark and empty. Past the grocery store where I bought produce every Thursday. Past the church where I'd sung in the choir until my knees got too bad for the standing. Everything looked the same and completely different, like I was seeing it all through warped glass. At the station, they processed me with efficient indifference. Fingerprints rolled onto cards, the ink staining my skin black. Mugshot taken against a height chart. The camera flash leaving purple spots in my vision. A female officer patted me down, her hands impersonal as they moved over my clothes, checking pockets and seams. They took my purse, my watch, my wedding ring that I'd never removed even after Edward died. Cataloged each item on a form, sealed them in a plastic bag with a number written in permanent marker. The holding cell was small, maybe 8 feet by 10. Gray concrete walls, a metal bench bolted to the floor, a toilet in the corner with no seat. It smelled like disinfectant trying to cover the stink of urine and vomit. The door clanged shut behind me, the lock engaging with a sound that seemed to echo in my bones. I sat on the bench, my hands folded in my lap where my ring should have been. The metal was cold through my clothes. Somewhere down the hall, someone was crying, a raw sound that went on and on. Farther away, voices shouted over each other, the words lost, but the rage unmistakable. I closed my eyes and thought about Marcus. Not the man who'd told these lies, but the boy he'd been. 4 years old, running through the backyard with a kite that never quite caught the wind. 7, losing his first tooth and tucking it under his pillow with such ceremony. 12, gangly and awkward, teaching himself guitar in his bedroom until his fingers bled. Where had I lost him? What had I done or failed to do that had twisted something inside him so badly he could do this? The answers wouldn't come. They never would. Tough. Story Block 1010. 6 months later, I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. The place was smaller than my old house, a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like coffee and someone's cinnamon candles. My hands pressed against the cool glass, feeling the slight vibration of traffic below. The charges had been dropped. The investigation had revealed inconsistencies in the accusations, text messages between Marcus and his ex-wife discussing how to make her pay for refusing to co-sign a loan. The prosecutor's office had formally apologized, but the damage had carved itself into my life like initials in wet cement, permanent and ugly. I turned from the window and walked to my small kitchen. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the quiet space with its familiar morning song. My reflection caught in the microwave door, older somehow, lines deeper around my eyes and mouth. I'd lost 15 pounds in those first terrible weeks, my appetite vanishing like smoke. The weight had started coming back, but slowly, reluctantly. The newspaper sat folded on the counter. I picked it up, feeling the ink transfer slightly to my fingertips. Local section, page 4. A small article about a woman who'd started a support group for those falsely accused of crimes. Her phone number was circled in blue ink. I'd called it 3 days ago, left a message, hadn't heard back yet. My phone buzzed against the laminate countertop. I reached for it, my heart doing that little skip it still did whenever I saw an unknown number. But this one I recognized. The community center where I'd started volunteering on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Reading to children, helping with literacy programs, sitting on those tiny chairs in bright rooms full of construction paper and glue sticks, surrounded by laughter and sticky fingers and innocence. "This is Olivia," I said, my voice steady now, reclaimed. "Hi, Ms. Hayes. It's Jennifer from the center. I wanted to let you know the kids loved the book you brought last week. Any chance you could lead the reading circle next Tuesday?" The words settled into my chest, warm and real. "I'd like that very much." After we hung up, I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that I'd refused to throw away. Steam rose in lazy spirals, carrying the rich, dark scent. I took a sip, savoring the heat and bitterness, the way it woke something inside me that had been sleeping too long. The living room held only the essentials: a couch, a bookshelf, a small television I rarely turned on. Boxes still lined one wall. Things I hadn't unpacked yet, maybe never would. Some belongings felt like they belonged to a different person, someone who'd existed before that knock on the door, before the handcuffs and the cell, and the shattering of everything I'd believed about maternal love. I set my coffee down and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with a soft chime. My email inbox showed 23 unread messages. Most were spam, but 3 were from women who'd read the article, who'd found my contact information somehow, who'd written to share their own stories of false accusations and shattered families. I read each one carefully, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I composed responses. Small words of solidarity, of understanding, of survival. The morning light strengthened, flooding through my windows and illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. I stood and stretched, feeling my spine pop and release. My yoga mat lay rolled in the corner. I spread it out on the hardwood floor, the rubber gripping the planks with a soft squeak. Downward dog. Child's pose. Warrior stance. My body moved through the positions, muscles stretching and holding, breath flowing in and out in measured counts. Sweat beaded on my forehead, trickled down my temples. The physical effort pushed everything else aside, leaving only breath and movement and the burn in my thighs. When I finished, I lay flat on my back, chest heaving, staring at the ceiling where a water stain had formed a shape like a bird in flight. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from the support group facilitator. "Meeting tonight at 7. Address attached." "Hope you can make it," I typed back quickly. "I'll be there." The shower ran hot, steam fogging the mirror until my reflection disappeared completely. I stood under the spray, letting it beat against my shoulders and back, washing away the salt and effort of the morning. My mind drifted to Marcus, as it still did a dozen times a day. The anger had dulled to something heavier, more permanent. Grief, maybe. For the relationship that would never be repaired. For the son I'd apparently never really known. I dressed in comfortable clothes, jeans that actually fit now, a green sweater soft against my skin. My hair, cut shorter than I'd worn it in decades, took only minutes to style. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with eyes that had seen the inside of a holding cell, that had watched her life collapse like a house of cards, that had somehow found a way to keep opening each morning. The support group met in a church basement across town. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking in a lot where fallen leaves collected in drifts against the curb. Inside, folding chairs formed a circle around a table holding coffee in a battered urn and store-brand cookies on a paper plate. 4 other people were already there, making small talk that died when I entered. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached, hand extended. "Olivia, I'm Patricia. I'm glad you came." Her grip was firm, warm, real. I held on perhaps a moment too long before releasing. The meeting started at 7 exactly. Stories poured out like water from a broken dam. Accusations, arrests, trials, verdicts. Lives torn apart by lies and misunderstandings and malice. I listened to each voice, recognizing my own pain reflected in theirs. When my turn came, my throat tightened, but the words emerged anyway. Halting at first, then stronger. The truth of what had happened. The devastation. The slow rebuilding. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again, I said, my voice carrying in the quiet basement. But I'm learning to live with the pieces. Heads nodded around the circle. No one offered empty platitudes or false hope. Just acknowledgement. Just witness. Walking to my car afterward, the night air bit at my cheeks and filled my lungs with its clean, cold clarity. Stars pierced the darkness overhead, distant and constant. I drove home through streets lit by sodium vapor lamps, past houses where families gathered around dinner tables, where children did homework, and parents watched television, and life unfolded in all its mundane, precious ordinariness. In my apartment, I made tea and settled onto my couch with a book I'd been reading in small increments. The story carried me away for an hour, then 2. When I finally closed it and turned off the lamp, darkness wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. I lay in bed, listening to the building settle and creak, to distant sirens and the whoosh of passing cars. Tomorrow I'd wake and do it all again. Make coffee, practice yoga, read to children, attend another meeting, build this new life one small action at a time, like laying bricks for a house on scorched ground. It wasn't the life I'd planned, wasn't the life I'd had, but it was mine, claimed and constructed from the rubble of what Marcus had tried to destroy. My eyes closed. Sleep came softly, mercifully, carrying me into dreams where I ran through fields with no fences, where the sky stretched endless and blue, where I was simply myself, not victim, not survivor, just a woman who'd learned that sometimes living well was its own form of justice. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.